In Japanese history, there once lived a prophet who aided many influential figures, including the CEO of Panasonic and the Prime Minister of Japan. Ironically, despite her extraordinary abilities, she was unable to foresee her own fate, leading to her unjust and tragic demise. Her death sent shockwaves across Japan, and over time, rumors surrounding the circumstances of her passing spread widely. Even today, her name still sparks heated discussions whenever the topic of her mysterious fate arises. But how did she die? What were these rumors? To truly understand the murder of Fujita and her child, we must first delve into her life. Fujita Toko was born on January 4, 1938 in Fukuoka Prefecture, Japan. Her childhood was far from easy. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she was raised by her mother. During World War II, her home was destroyed in an air raid, forcing her into homelessness as she struggled to survive. However, in 1947, when Fujita was just 9 years old, a mysterious event occurred that would change her life forever. According to Fujita herself, one morning, she awoke to find a fox standing at the foot of her bed. What made this encounter extraordinary was that she could communicate with the fox without any difficulty. From that moment on, the fox granted her the ability to foresee certain future events. In Japanese mythology, foxes are revered as sacred creatures. They are believed to hunt pests that threaten agricultural production, and thus, they are considered divine protectors of crops and food supplies. In Fujita's case, many believe that the gods had bestowed upon her the power of prophecy. With this newfound ability, Fujita quickly gained local recognition. As her predictions continued to come true, public interest in her grew. Soon, the media took notice and her reputation spread far beyond her hometown. She even caught the attention of Japan's political and business elite. Riding the wave of her success, Fujita established her own consulting office and provided strategic advice to businesses. It was rumored that she had foreseen several major historical events, including the signing of the Japan-U.S. Security Treaty, the assassination of South Korean President Park Chung-hee, and the marriage of Emperor Akihito to a commoner. Her clientele included some of the most powerful figures in Japan, such as Konosuke Matsushita, the founder of Panasonic, and Takeo Fukuda, Japan's 67th Prime Minister. At a time when cars were still considered a luxury, Fujita owned 5 high-end vehicles, lived in a lavish mansion, and even possessed a private jet. Her wealth, which reached hundreds of millions, stirred both admiration and envy. However, her fortune did not last forever. On March 13, 1968, a devastating incident occurred that marked the beginning of her downfall. A fire broke out in a sauna she had invested in, resulting in the death of an employee. Naturally, Fujita could not escape responsibility. Although the court's ruling was not particularly severe, the damage to her career was irreversible. To the public, she was a woman who could predict the future. So how could she have failed to foresee the fire that destroyed her own business? Doubt and skepticism spread like wildfire, and her credibility crumbled. By 1970, at the age of 32, Fujita moved to Hawaii in an attempt to escape public scrutiny. Over the years, she gradually faded from the spotlight. She later adopted a son, Goro, and the two lived a quiet life on the island. For a time, it seemed as though Japan had forgotten about her. That was until a gruesome crime reignited interest in her name and made headlines across the country once again. At 4:30 p.m. on February 23, 1994, the Hawaii police received an urgent phone call from an employee at the Japanese consulate. He reported a fire at the Sandalwood Apartments, a residential complex near Waikiki Beach. Firefighters quickly arrived at the scene. Fortunately, the fire was contained before it could spread to other apartments and was extinguished in time. However, as they began clearing the site, the rescue team made a chilling discovery. Inside a closet, they found the lifeless body of a woman. The victim was none other than Princess Fujita, 56 years old. It was believed that she had hidden inside the closet to escape the flames, but unfortunately, perished in the fire. However, the forensic examination revealed a gunshot wound to her chest, and the official cause of death was determined to be a bullet wound. Fujita had a 20-year-old son named Goro Fujita, with whom she lived in the apartment. However, at the time of the incident, Goro was nowhere to be found, and the police were unable to contact him. During the investigation, a neighbor provided crucial information. He revealed that Goro was sociable and often made friends, but these so-called friends frequently borrowed money from him without ever repaying their debts. Due to financial struggles, Goro repeatedly borrowed money from his mother. Concerned that her son might be influenced by the wrong crowd, Fujita began restricting his allowance, which greatly angered him. What made matters worse was that Goro was not Fujita's biological son. Police speculated that the conflict over money may have escalated into violence. Unable to get the funds he wanted, Goro might have attacked his mother and then set the fire to destroy any evidence. Later that same night, at approximately 10:30 p.m., another fire broke out in a parking lot just 5 kilometers from Fujita's residence. This time, a red car was engulfed in flames. Once the fire was extinguished, authorities made a chilling discovery. Inside the vehicle, they found the body of a man, his hands and feet bound. The cause of death was the same as Fujita's, a gunshot wound to the chest. 2 murders and 2 fires occurring on the same day immediately raised suspicions. The police were now faced with a perplexing case. If Goro had killed his mother, who had killed him, and why? The double homicide sent shockwaves through Hawaii, particularly within the Japanese community, as Fujita had once been a prominent figure in Japan. Due to the case's high-profile nature, even the Japanese consulate became involved in the investigation. It was soon discovered that on the day of her death, Fujita had called her bank, requesting to withdraw 500 million Japanese yen and have it delivered to her residence. She insisted that the money was crucial to saving someone's life. However, since she was not physically present to verify the transaction, the bank refused her request. Throughout the phone call, the bank employee overheard a male voice speaking Japanese in the background. This raised concerns that Fujita might have been under duress. Sensing something was wrong, the employee contacted the Japanese consulate, which then sent someone to check on her, only to arrive at the scene of the fire. As detectives dug deeper into the Fujita family's connections, one man quickly came under scrutiny: 28-year-old Fukusaku Raida. Just 2 days after the murder, at a pawnshop located a mere 300 meters from Fujita's apartment, Raida was seen selling a collection of expensive jewelry worth approximately 50 million Japanese yen. By sheer coincidence, the shop owner recognized the jewelry as belonging to Fujita and immediately alerted the authorities. Raida and Fujita were known to be friends and were both members of a diving club. Over the years, Raida had borrowed money from Fujita multiple times but had never repaid a single JPY. Further evidence at Fujita's ransacked apartment indicated that all valuable items had been stolen, strongly suggesting that robbery was the primary motive. What made Raida even more suspicious was his criminal record. He had been arrested 4 times in the past for illegal firearm possession. And in this case, both Fujita and her son had been shot in the chest. Realizing they had a prime suspect, the police sought to bring Raida in for questioning. However, their investigation hit a major roadblock. Just 2 days after the murders, Raida had purchased a plane ticket and fled back to Japan. This complicated the case significantly. Extraditing a Japanese citizen to the United States would require concrete and irrefutable evidence. Without it, justice for Fujita and her son remained uncertain. With many crucial clues destroyed in the fire, the Hawaiian police sought help from forensic experts. Upon receiving the request, a forensic specialist promptly arrived at the scene and began reviewing security footage. At exactly 9:28 a.m. on the day of the incident, both Goro Fujita and Raida Fukusaku were seen together in the same elevator. Then at 12:55 p.m., Raida was recorded leaving Fujita's apartment carrying a bag. At 3:54 p.m., he returned, this time with a visibly bulging backpack. Just 3 hours later, the fire broke out and all valuables inside the residence had vanished. It was highly probable that Raida's swollen backpack contained stolen items from Fujita's home. At 5:35 p.m., Raida borrowed a dolly from his company and returned to the 13th floor. Then, at 9:15 p.m., security cameras captured him pushing out a human-shaped object wrapped in a white cloth, presumably Goro's lifeless body. He then drove to a nearby parking lot and set the car on fire. With these new findings, Rita's involvement in the crime became even more apparent. Investigators discovered the borrowed dolly, and upon closer inspection, they found traces of blood on it. Forensic tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Goro. Further analysis at Rita's own residence also uncovered small amounts of Goro's blood, solidifying suspicions. The following morning, at 8:24 a.m., surveillance footage captured Rita removing a sofa chair from his apartment. This action immediately raised red flags. Typically, large furniture pieces were transported by professional movers, not the residents themselves. Acting on their suspicions, the police searched the basement storage area and found the sofa chair. Upon examination, it was covered in large amounts of blood, which DNA tests later confirmed to be Goro's. Meanwhile, further investigation at Fujita's apartment uncovered a bullet hole in the sofa, perfectly matching the gunshot wound found on her body. Additionally, strands of Fujita's hair, untouched by the fire, were retrieved from the scene. With this growing web of forensic evidence, the case against Rita Fukusaku was finally complete. He was identified as the murderer. Although he had fled to Japan, U.S. authorities had gathered enough proof to request his extradition back to Hawaii to stand trial. In court, Rita admitted to disposing of Goro's body, but adamantly denied committing murder. His defense attorneys presented what they claimed was a crucial alibi. At 10:35 p.m., just 5 minutes after Goro's car was set ablaze, surveillance footage from a supermarket captured Rita shopping. The supermarket was located 3 kilometers from the crime scene. His lawyers argued that it would have been impossible for him to be at both places at the same time. However, the prosecution countered this claim. They argued that if the streets were clear and there were no traffic lights in the area, Rita could have driven quickly between both locations, setting the fire before heading to the store. With a solid chain of forensic evidence and undeniable DNA proof, the jury reached a verdict. On August 23rd, the court found Rita Fukusaku guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder. Since Hawaii does not have the death penalty, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison. The shocking murder of Fujita Toko, also known as Princess Fujita, sent ripples through both Japan and the United States. Fujita had been a well-known figure in Japan, and the mystery surrounding her death led to endless speculation about the true motive behind the crime. Some skeptics even questioned whether Rita Fukusaku was merely a scapegoat and if the real killer remained at large. In 2013, after spending 20 years behind bars, Rita filed for clemency. In his petition, he once again vehemently maintained his innocence, but cryptically stated that he could not reveal the full truth. Although his request was denied, his persistence fueled public suspicion. Could there have been another perpetrator? Speculation continued to swirl around Fujita's life, especially concerning her connections with high-profile figures in politics and business. To this day, some believe that the true mastermind behind her murder was someone much more powerful, someone whose secrets Fujita may have known too much about. It is said that every time Fujita performed a fortune-telling session, she meticulously recorded every detail, no matter how small, in a private journal. Rumors later spread that after moving to Hawaii, she had plans to publish this diary for the public. This revelation allegedly unsettled many powerful individuals, leading to speculation that someone had secretly ordered Rita to silence her. The ransacking of Fujita's apartment might not have been a simple burglary. It could have been a desperate search for the journal. However, to this day, the existence of this diary remains a mystery. Another theory revolves around Goro's true identity. Some suspect that he was not merely Fujita's adopted son, but rather her illegitimate child, fathered by a mysterious Japanese politician whose identity remains unknown. At the time of the lawsuit against her, Fujita's career was already declining, yet her family remained wealthy. There was no real financial need for her to relocate to Hawaii, which led some to believe that her move was politically motivated. Another theory suggests that her death was the result of a political power struggle. Some even believe that her enemies sent assassins to Hawaii to eliminate both mother and son. However, despite thorough investigations, police found no concrete evidence suggesting the presence of a third party. As a result, these remain nothing more than theories and speculation. Throughout history, many renowned fortune tellers have met untimely deaths. Some believe that revealing divine secrets leads to heaven's punishment. However, supernatural forces aside, we all have secrets we never want exposed. In the realm of politics, intense rivalries and hidden conspiracies lurk behind major decisions. In this world, those who possess forbidden knowledge do not always live long. People who hold dangerous information often become a threat to those who wish to keep the truth buried. In some cases, even the ones holding the secrets themselves live in fear. Perhaps the sudden deaths of various fortune tellers were not merely accidents, but deliberate eliminations, because they knew too much. This raises a troubling question. In today's world of political intrigue, how safe are those who possess sensitive knowledge? And that concludes today's case. Do you believe that Rito is truly the real killer? In 1850, China was a predominantly underdeveloped agrarian country where opportunities for wealth were incredibly scarce, even for the most talented individuals in society. By the early 1850s, rumors of a massive gold rush across the Pacific Ocean began to spread like wildfire. Thousands of families ranging from the impoverished to the moderately wealthy gathered all their belongings and set out on a life-changing, perilous adventure. They boarded ships, braved treacherous waves and storms, and faced untold dangers. However, when they finally arrived in America, they discovered a harsh reality. Much of the gold had already been mined by others. Their dreams of fortune shattered in an instant, leaving them with a grim decision to make. They had poured all their resources and energy into reaching America, only to face crushing disappointment. Should they return to their homeland empty-handed, or should they stay and struggle to find new opportunities on foreign soil? Ultimately, nearly all 25,000 Chinese who arrived in America decided to remain in California. They took on any work they could find, doing whatever was necessary to survive and integrate into their new communities. Some became fishermen, while others worked in construction. Yet finding steady work was far from simple. But in 1863, an unexpected glimmer of hope emerged. The U.S. government announced the construction of the first transcontinental railroad connecting San Francisco to Council Bluffs, Iowa. However, there was a major issue. They couldn't recruit enough workers willing to take on this demanding job. The labor required workers to leave their families for months on end and toil in remote, desolate areas. To resolve the labor shortage, America turned to China. The call for workers reached across the Pacific, and the result was astonishing. 300,000 Chinese men boarded ships to California to participate in the monumental project. By 1880, Chinese immigrants made up over 10% of California's population. They began building large Chinatown neighborhoods in major cities like San Diego, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Jose, and most notably, San Francisco. In 1882, the U.S. government enacted one of the strangest laws in its history, the Chinese Exclusion Act. This law allowed only Chinese men to enter the U.S., forcing them to leave their wives and children behind in China. The law gave rise to an alarming problem. By 1890, the San Francisco Bay Area housed 89,000 Chinese men, but fewer than 5,000 Chinese women. As a result, these men began exploring alternative relationships. In Louisiana, 57% of Chinese men married African American women, while in California, 43% married European American women. This law stunted the growth of the Chinese American community for decades. It wasn't until 1943, when the Chinese Exclusion Act was finally repealed, that the community began to recover. The Chinese population surged almost immediately, with many moving into bustling Chinatowns in California. These neighborhoods grew more vibrant and populous than ever before. However, the story truly entered a new chapter in the 1960s when a fresh wave of Chinese immigrants from Hong Kong arrived in San Francisco. But this transformation wasn't solely driven by the existing Chinatown community. In 1960, a group of teenagers from Hong Kong decided to leave behind the violence and chaos of their hometown streets, hoping for an easier life in San Francisco. Little did they know life in America would present challenges far beyond what they had imagined. This marked the beginning of a profound change that would redefine the identity and culture of Chinatown forever. When they arrived in San Francisco, The young immigrants began attending Galileo High School, one of the city's most infamous institutions, not for its academic achievements, but for its rampant fights and school violence. Galileo was also known for one notable figure, O.J. Simpson, though he wasn't the reason the Chinese teens felt uneasy. The moment they set foot on campus, they became the primary targets of students from Fillmore and Potrero Hill. Daily they were mocked, shoved into lockers, and relentlessly humiliated. At first they tried to endure it, holding on to the hope that things would eventually improve. But as the pain and disgrace piled up over time, their patience ran out. A group of Hong Kong teens decided to take a stand, declaring themselves Huaqing, also known as Dub C, for no longer held them back. They proclaimed that no one at the school could touch them anymore. Having grown up amidst the violence and chaos of Hong Kong streets, there was nothing in this new land that could intimidate them. But their story didn't stop within the school walls. The Huaqing gang began forming connections throughout the Chinatown community. However, what started as schoolyard resistance would soon escalate into something far more complicated. They lived in a 12-story public housing complex in Chinatown, a place governed by strict, unspoken rules. Chinatown wasn't a neighborhood where anyone could simply do as they pleased. Everything was controlled by the Tongs, powerful associations that dominated the area. Groups like Sing Sui and Hop Sing oversaw every activity in Chinatown. Nothing happened without their approval. When news of the emerging Huaqing gang reached the Tongs, they were far from pleased. But instead of confronting the gang directly, the Tongs chose a different approach. They requested a meeting with Huaqing and offered their protection in exchange for a monthly payment. Initially, Huaqing laughed off the proposal, believing they could defend themselves without anyone's help. But they underestimated the intricate, deeply rooted system that governed Chinatown. In Chinatown, elders were held in high regard, and no one acted without their consent. Most of the wealth in the area came from under-the-table deals and clandestine trade in imported goods. The Tongs leaders claimed the lion's share of the profits, while younger members were left with whatever remained. That was the way it worked, and Huaqing had a clear choice: join the Tongs and accept their place in the system, or refuse and fend for themselves against the challenges that would inevitably come. Many in Huaqing chose the safer route, aligning themselves with the Tongs. However, not everyone agreed with this decision. Two brothers, Zhou Fong and Glenn Fong, known as the most daring members of the gang, decided to defy everyone. They refused to join the Tongs and broke away to form their own gang. Their new group was called the Zhou Boys, with one simple motto: do things our way and follow no one else's rules. From that moment, Chinatown would never be the same. The rivalry between Huaqing and the Zhou Boys marked the beginning of a new era of conflict, one that would profoundly reshape the community. Zhou Fong's ambitions grew bolder with time. He wasn't satisfied with just holding on to control of Chinatown, he wanted more. Determined to expand his influence, he began recruiting members far and wide, aiming to transform the Zhou Boys into a formidable force. Zhou quickly became a powerful figure within the Chinese-American community. He traveled to cities like Oakland, San Leandro, and Hayward, building a growing network of loyal members, all united under his vision. With each new recruit, the Zhou Boys gained strength, and the fragile balance of power in Chinatown began to crumble. A storm was brewing, one that would forever alter the destiny of the community. The Zhou Boys began strutting through Chinatown with bold confidence, chests puffed out, doing whatever they pleased. But this audacity marked the turning point where the situation escalated into something far more dangerous. Huaqing and the Tongs could no longer sit idly by. They decided to send a chilling message. At precisely 11 a.m. on March 1st, 1970, as the city bustled with its usual rhythm, Glenn Fong, a key member of the Zhou Boys, stepped out of his apartment. Suddenly, boom, this wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war, signaling a conflict that couldn't be undone. Instead of intimidating Zhou Fong into submission, the attack only fueled his rage. His fury ignited a wildfire of retaliation, turning Chinatown into a battlefield. By 1970, San Francisco's homicide rate had climbed to a shocking 28.5 per 100,000 residents, ranking among the top 5 in the nation. A significant portion of these murders stemmed from the bloody clashes between the Zhou Boys, Huaqing, and the Tongs. The Tongs, unwilling to relent, continued delivering their own brand of ruthless justice. They relied on a chillingly traditional method: 2 men and a rope. No guns, no knives, no modern weapons. Just a simple rope capable of instilling unimaginable terror. On November 5th, 1970, they found George Yun, a Joe Boys member in Presidio. 2 weeks later, on November 19th, they discovered Alan Hom. Both men had been killed using a rope, their deaths serving as a grim warning to anyone daring to challenge the Tongs' authority. Chinatown was now one of the most dangerous areas in San Francisco. Amid the chaos, Raymond Leung, a Joe Boys member, decided to act. He pulled Joe Fong aside and warned him that the situation had spiraled out of control. If the violence didn't stop, everyone involved would end up dead. Raymond, fearing for his own life and that of others, pleaded for a truce. But courage alone couldn't save Raymond from his grim fate. The very next day, his lifeless body was found in Chinatown, discarded without a shred of mercy. The conflict reached a boiling point on July 4th, 1977, during Chinatown's most profitable time of year, the height of the fireworks trade. Ping Yuan, under Hua Qing and Sing Sui's control, was the hub of bustling fireworks sales. One dark night, Felix Huey, a Joe Boys member nicknamed Tiger, dared to sell fireworks right outside Hua Qing's territory. This blatant act of defiance enraged Hua Qing. That same evening, they approached Felix, and boom! The death of Felix Huey sent shockwaves through Chinatown, shattering any lingering illusions of peace. The gang war had transformed into a survival game, where power and existence were bought at the highest cost: human lives. The infamous Golden Dragon Restaurant Massacre became one of the most notorious events in California's history, rooted in a meticulously planned, yet perilously reckless scheme. To understand how it unfolded, we must rewind to 1977. Joe Fong, the head of the Joe Boys, enlisted the services of a spy named Carlos John to shadow Hua Qing's every move. For months, Carlos trailed Hua Qing in silence, gathering intelligence and waiting for the perfect moment. One day, while observing them in a cafe, Carlos overheard a critical conversation about an upcoming meeting at the Golden Dragon restaurant during Labor Day. Seizing the opportunity, Joe Fong knew this was his chance. He began crafting a bold and dangerous plan, one that would forever alter Chinatown's history. On September 4th, 1977, 5 members of the Joe Boys convened in Daly City. Their destination, the Golden Dragon restaurant. Anger and hatred etched across their faces. They drove through the city, harboring dark intentions. Cold and unrelenting, the group stepped out of their car and entered the bustling restaurant. Their eyes were sharp, their movements purposeful. What followed was a tragedy no one could have foreseen. The attack shook Chinatown to its core and garnered nationwide attention. Tragically, the victims of this senseless violence were not members of Hua Qing. Instead, they were innocent diners caught in the crossfire. The brutality of the incident plunged Chinatown into chaos. Streets that once bustled with life became eerily silent. Shops shuttered their doors. Tourists avoided the area, and residents lived in fear, afraid to step outside. The community had reached its breaking point. Determined to restore order, local leaders rallied together. Meanwhile, the San Francisco Police Department, SFPD, formed a special task force aimed at dismantling the influence of Hua Qing and the Joe Boys. It took time for the truth to unravel, but on March 24th, 1978, authorities arrested 5 individuals connected to the attack. Shockingly, they were all 17-year-old students from Galileo High School, youngsters swept into a war far beyond their understanding. Curtis Tam received a 23-year sentence, but was released in 1991 at the age of 30. Melvin Yu, Peter Ng, and Tom Yu were all sentenced to life imprisonment. However, all 3 were eventually paroled. Melvin in 2014, Peter in 2015, and Tom in 2018. These sentences brought some closure, but questions lingered. Was justice truly served, or was this merely the price paid for a conflict that left no real winners? By 1983, Chinatown had reclaimed its reputation as one of the safest areas in San Francisco. Yet the scars of the Golden Dragon Massacre remained, a haunting reminder of the violence that once gripped the community. Despite the return to normalcy, but one figure refused to fade into obscurity. Raymond Chow, better known as Shrimp Boy, a peculiar and enigmatic character. Chow was starkly different from Joe Fong. Where Joe Fong was a lone wolf driven by brutality, Shrimp Boy operated with strategic finesse and teamwork. Many considered him even more dangerous than Fong. By the late 1980s, Chow's reputation had reached the ears of Peter Cheung, the powerful leader of the Wohap to Triad, Hong Kong's most influential crime syndicate at the time. In 1989, Cheung approached Chow with a proposition to collaborate to expand the Triad's influence into the San Francisco Bay Area. This marked the beginning of a new chapter for Chow. Appointed the head of the Triad's operations in Western America, Shrimp Boy seized the opportunity with enthusiasm. He quickly expanded his criminal enterprise, building an empire that amassed immense wealth and power. Despite serving 2 prison sentences between 1980 and 1989, Chow remained a charismatic figure. Strangely, he was often viewed as more than just a criminal. His charm and connections allowed him to mingle with influential figures including Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, and other prominent politicians. The story of Raymond Chow is one of ambition, power, and eventual collapse. From his rise to the top of Chinatown's underworld to his entanglements with high society, Shrimp Boy remains a figure of both fascination and infamy, a testament to the complex and turbulent history of Chinatown's crime syndicates. Despite running a vast criminal enterprise and amassing a fortune from illegal activities, Raymond Chow managed to keep a low profile for 25 years. The quiet that settled over Chinatown after the turbulent 1970s provided him with the perfect cover to expand his influence. Chow carefully cultivated his public image. No longer just a gangster, he reinvented himself as a reformed criminal, engaging in community activities, attending government meetings, speaking to youth groups, and even appearing in promotional advertisements. However, this facade would crumble in 2014 when California State. On March 14, 2014, Chinatown was rocked by shocking news. Leland Yee had been arrested on charges of extortion, bribery, and other serious crimes. The FBI had been monitoring Yee for months, wiretapping his conversations and investigating his connections. Their operation culminated in a sting. Undercover agents posing as arms dealers offered Yee $42,000 in exchange for his cooperation. Yee accepted without hesitation. This was the evidence the FBI needed. When they raided Yee's office, they uncovered a damning connection. Leland Yee was closely tied to Raymond Chow. On March 26, 2014, Raymond Chow was arrested and charged with 162 counts of fraud and extortion. After 30 years of operating under the radar, Chinatown's criminal underworld was finally exposed. Chow faced the possibility of a life sentence, while Yee was sentenced to 5 years in prison and released in 2020. Though Chinatown's criminal organizations continue to exist, they have become more discreet than ever, operating far from the public eye. Despite this, the area has enjoyed over 30 years of relative safety, becoming one of San Francisco's safest neighborhoods. A long-awaited reprieve for residents who had endured decades of violence and unrest. What do you think of the mysterious tales surrounding Chinatown's gangs and their quest for power? Fidel Castro was one of the most controversial and influential figures in 20th century Latin America. While some revered him as a revolutionary hero, others viewed him as a dictator. However, no one could deny his pivotal role in modern history, particularly after he assumed power in Cuba in February 1959. Castro posed a major threat to the U.S., especially as he developed close ties with the Soviet Union. In response, the U.S. government, particularly the CIA, conducted numerous operations aimed at eliminating the Cuban leader. Over the course of 45 years, they attempted a wide range of assassination plots against Fidel Castro, employing everything from explosives to elaborate schemes like honey traps and even heavy weaponry, such as artillery and surface-to-air missiles. Castro's survival made him one of the most resilient politicians in modern history. According to CIA declassified documents, in 2007, at least 8 assassination attempts were made on him between 1960 and 1965 alone. But the actual number is even more shocking. 634 assassination attempts were reported between 1959 and 2000. As revealed by General Fabian Escalante, The former head of Cuba's intelligence service in his book 634 Ways to Kill Fidel, the CIA and Mafia plot to assassinate Fidel Castro. The credibility of this figure is further supported by Nikolai Leonov, a former KGB agent and key liaison between Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev and Castro. Castro's extraordinary survival was due not only to Cuba's effective security and intelligence systems, but also to an element of sheer luck. When asked about his survival against hundreds of assassination attempts, Castro made a witty remark to Leonov stating, "Those who want to kill me have a weakness in their resolve. They want to live to see what will happen after my death." This statement reflects not only his sharp wit, but also his remarkable resilience in the face of constant threats to his life. The concept of assassination, in Castro's case, encompasses far more than conventional definitions. It included everything from direct sniper attacks to failed plans involving explosives, poison, and even bizarre ideas that only ever existed on paper. However, there is substantial evidence to confirm that many of these plans were actually set in motion. In the early 1960s, with the approval of the U.S. president, a large-scale campaign was launched to overthrow Cuba's revolutionary government. General Fabian Escalante disclosed that the CIA had set up a highly active operational base in Florida staffed with more than 400 officers and 4,000 Cuban agents. From there, they managed over 300 covert organizations with the unified goal of eliminating Castro. One of the peak efforts was the creation of Brigade 2506, a special task force trained in Cuba specifically aimed at toppling Castro's government. In April 1961, just a year after Castro took power, the U.S. government offered a Cuban citizen $10,000 to assassinate him. The plan was to stage a traffic accident that would target not only Castro, but also other leaders like Che Guevara and Raul Castro. However, the hired assassin fled with the money, marking a memorable failure in the CIA's string of unsuccessful attempts. One of the biggest challenges in assassinating Castro was accessing his private life. The CIA came up with the idea of using a honey trap to carry out this mission. Marita Lorenz, a German woman living in New York, had an on-and-off relationship with Castro since their accidental meeting at Havana's harbor in 1959. During a trip to the U.S., she was persuaded by the CIA to participate in an assassination plot against him in January 1960. Marita returned to Cuba with poison hidden in her luggage, but at the last moment, she couldn't summon the courage to carry out the mission. There are two different accounts of what happened next. In one version, Marita threw the poison down the sink. In another, the vial of poison had been hidden in a lotion bottle and melted. That night, Marita spent time with Fidel, and afterward she returned to the U.S., joining the International Anti-Communist Brigade, ending her ironic tale. After repeated failures, the CIA had to devise even more elaborate plots to remove Castro. One of the unique ideas focused on his habit of smoking cigars. In 1961, the CIA planned to send him a cigar laced with botulinum toxin, a deadly substance capable of killing upon contact with the lips. However, the toxic cigar remains a mystery. Perhaps an operative had second thoughts, or Castro's security team uncovered and foiled the plan just in time. In September 1962, another group planned to attack Castro with grenades at the Plaza de la Revolution during a ceremony marking the anniversary of the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution. The Cuban government, however, discovered and stopped this scheme, arresting members of the group, including Ángel Mesa Puentes, Teo Fernandez, and Roberto Porto Infanzon. Attempts to assassinate Castro didn't stop there. In May 1966 and August 1969, several more grenade-based plots were uncovered and foiled. Grenades became a common weapon in the late 1960s for efforts to eliminate Fidel Castro. Undeterred by these setbacks, the CIA once again returned to the idea of cigars, but this time, instead of using poison, they attempted to use explosives. The plan involved placing a bomb inside a cigar designed to detonate upon opening, intending to kill anyone nearby. In 1966, during Castro's diplomatic tour, a CIA operative was assigned the task of secretly placing a box of cigars in Castro's hotel room. However, the plan was ultimately scrapped at the last moment for diplomatic reasons, fearing the assassination might have serious consequences on international relations. In the early 1960s, in a desperate attempt to remove Castro, The CIA even collaborated with Samuel Momo Giancana, a notorious Italian-American mafia boss known for smuggling and murder. These mafia organizations had suffered significant losses when Castro's revolutionary government confiscated their casinos and hotels, making the assassination of Castro a priority to regain their financial interests. One of the clumsiest yet closest attempts to poison Castro involved chocolate milk. In March 1960, the CIA planted a mafia-connected waiter at Havana Libra Hotel, where Castro often visited. When Castro ordered chocolate milk, the waiter prepared to poison him, but found that the poison capsule had frozen in the refrigerator and shattered when he tried to retrieve it. By the mid-1960s, the CIA devised even more daring assassination plans targeting Castro's personal interests. For instance, one idea involved planting a seashell rigged with explosives at a location where he frequently dived, or using a diving suit contaminated with deadly bacteria, which a lawyer would present to him during prisoner release negotiations. However, both plans remain mere concepts. One of the most sophisticated ideas involved creating a fountain pen capable of delivering a lethal dose of poison within minutes. A CIA operative in Paris handed this device to Rolando Cubola, a Cuban dissident official. However, the agent ultimately abandoned the mission due to the high risks involved. After numerous failed assassination attempts, the CIA shifted focus from trying to kill Castro to discrediting him. One of the most unique plans aimed at targeting his beard, a symbol of the Cuban Revolution. They considered using depilatory chemicals in his shoes or cigars to cause his hair to fall out, intending to destroy his iconic image. However, this bizarre plan never came to fruition, though it has been recorded as one of the more peculiar attempts in history. In January 1985, Cuban intelligence uncovered a bold assassination plot. The operation, codenamed Saturnino Beltran, involved anti-Sandinista Nicaraguans and Cuban exiles from Florida. Their plan was to use a surface-to-air missile to shoot down Fidel Castro's plane as he traveled to attend the inauguration of President Daniel Ortega in Managua. However, Cuban intelligence managed to thwart the attempt in time. Nearly a decade later, in November 1994, another scheme was uncovered during the 4th Ibero-American Summit in Cartagena, Colombia. Intelligence revealed that the Cuban-American National Foundation intended to assassinate Castro using a .50 caliber Barrett sniper rifle, which had been smuggled in from Miami. Like previous plans, though, this one was also foiled before it could be executed. By 2000, one of the most audacious assassination attempts took place when Castro visited Panama. Cuban security forces uncovered and arrested 4 individuals, including former CIA operative Luis Posada Carriles, a highly dangerous figure plotting to plant 90 kilograms of explosives under the stage where Castro was scheduled to speak. Carriles, a known master of clandestine CIA operations in Latin America, was also suspected of involvement in the capture and execution of Che Guevara. After decades of failed assassination attempts, the U.S. ultimately abandoned these efforts in the early 21st century. Castro lived to the age of 90, passing away in 2016. Leadership of Cuba was then transferred to his brother, Raúl Castro, who held office from 2008 until April 2018, after which Miguel Díaz-Canel assumed the role of president of Cuba in October 2019. In a fascinating anecdote shared by Russian President Vladimir Putin during an interview with American journalist Oliver Stone, Putin recalled a conversation with Castro about the numerous assassination attempts. Castro had asked, "Do you know I'm still alive?" He answered his own question, "Because I personally manage my security." This simple statement sheds light on Castro's extraordinary ability to survive hundreds of assassination attempts throughout his 5 decades in power. What are your thoughts on this incredible story? Feel free to leave a comment below to share your perspective. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.